So as our Zoom etiquette, please check your name and be sure that is the name that you would like for us to use. Please be on video as much as possible. That helps to create community and then also trust, especially in a situation of trying to create community when we are talking about difficult topics. Also, raise your hand when you need to speak. A little bit later, we're going to have a time for people to ask questions. And then the whole time you can use the chat if you're not comfortable sharing your questions later. And then please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. And then be mindful of background noise and distractions, as we know that always happens. The objectives that we have for tonight is that what we hope that all of you, once you leave this room tonight, is that we will have a shared understanding of immigration and related concepts, a better understanding of the immigrant presence in our community and schools. We will have heard immigrants living in Natick, their challenges and their contributions, understood the rationale for a welcoming immigration policy in Natick, and then a shared understanding on immigration's complexities and challenges and what we can do to help. Let's review a few community agreements that we would like to make sure that all of us are able to create a safe space for everyone that is present here tonight. So we know that together we know a lot, and alone we do not know it all. Do your best, be curious and respectful, uphold confidentiality, lean into discomfort. That is how we grow. And then take a space and make a space. Honor and respect each other's identities, thoughts, and expertise. Celebrate a diversity of perspective with open-mindedness and foster spaces for vulnerability. And practice active listening, a culture of curiosity while staying present. So here are your panelists. You're going to hear from Oh, there was a question? Sorry. I thought somebody was asking something. So Marge Robertson, who is a retired Natick public school teacher, also Metro West Immigrant Center volunteer, and our very own Natick is United Associate Coordinator. She's going to be walking us through some terms to create shared language. Susan Simone Khan is an immigration attorney. Rolf Larsen, an activist, member of Metro West Asylee Family Coalition. Both of them are going to be talking about the myth that have been created about immigrants and dispelling those. Lauren Adams is an English language education department head, English and ELE teacher at Natick High School. She's going to be telling us the story of the immigrants that are present in our high school and the schools in Natick. Andrea Ribas Pricoma is founder and managing attorney at Pricoma Law, LLC, Boston, Massachusetts. And she's going to tell us her story of how she got here and what she has been doing and contributing to our community. Cody Jacobs, probably a lot of you know him. He's a BU lecturer, community activist, and he's going to be telling a little bit of the story of how we have been working with the Natick Immigration Policy Coalition, what it is and what you can do to support it. And then finally, we're going to have Jennifer Gentile. She's a parent of 4 children, co-founder of Think, clinical psychologist from Boston Children's and also Harvard Medical School. And she's going to be telling us a story of how she had welcomed immigrants in her home, and also the work that she had been doing in the community. So without further ado, I will ask Marge to come on and begin the terms that she wanted to for us to learn tonight.
Hello, and thank you all for being here. I tried to find what I found were terms that people tend to misinterpret or get confused about. And we can also, I can send you this when we're done if you would like a copy of it. So to start with, a migrant. A migrant is basically anyone who moves from place to place within his or her country or across a border. Usually it's for economic reasons, and they're not necessarily forced to leave their native countries, but they're seeking better opportunities. An immigrant is a person who migrates to another country for a variety of reasons. Basically, an immigrant is a person living in a country other than that of where he or she was born. And an alien is a legal term for any person who's not a citizen or national of the United States. It's not often used anymore by most people, but it still stands as a legal term. Next. Miriam? A refugee is a person who is not in his or her country of nationality, but cannot return to the country because of fear of prosecution. Refugees are identified by official entities such as the government or the United Nations Refugee Commission. If you obtain refugee status, you're given protections under international law and conventions, and you're also given a lot of support. If a refugee comes to the United States, they can become a lawful permanent resident. Refugees, however, can often end up waiting years and years and years in refugee camps before they're actually placed where they would like to be. Next. So an asylum seeker is someone who is also seeking international protection, but isn't recognized as a refugee. They have to apply for protection, and they must be in the country of destination, whereas a refugee is not in the country of destination. So asylum seeker has to be in the United States if they want to apply for asylum. They cannot apply from another country. So they have to cross a border in order to apply in this country. Next. Documented and undocumented, those are terms you hear all the time. And a documented person basically means they have legal papers, visas, green cards, immigration documentation that is giving them permission to live in the country. An undocumented person is a person who live in a country without the legal papers or permission to stay. But bear in mind that an undocumented person can become documented by applying for asylum, and they have a year from the time they arrive in the country to do that. So it's a misnomer to just call everybody undocumented, because some people are in the process and they may become documented fairly soon. Temporary protected status lets people come from certain countries. That's most of the Haitians who are here right now are under TPS. I think there are other groups also, which I should have looked up, but I didn't. So they're allowed in the country because of things that are going on in their country where they can't live. A parolee is someone who's here under temporary permission and couldn't get a visa or lawfully enter that way. They're often granted humanitarian parole because of something that happened to them. It doesn't mean they're permanent residents, and it can change. A resident alien is a non-US citizen who's in the US. It includes green card holders, and other non-citizens are also considered resident aliens. Next. So an asylum seeker or someone who crosses the border goes through what's called a credible fear interview, and they have to convince someone that they have a credible fear of returning to their home country. A reasonable fear is given to people who've been deported and returned to the United States. They're conducted by asylum officers, not necessarily judges. Next. Chain migration is one you hear being used as a negative. It basically means that an immigrant is able to sponsor another family member to come to the US. Birthright citizenship means that if you're born in the United States, regardless of where your parents are from, you can be considered a US resident. And children that are born to people often receive Social Security numbers right away. It's not always true, but a child that's born in the United States is considered a United States citizen regardless of where their parents came from. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, is a program that was instituted for children who came here illegally, meaning they were brought here when they were too young to make any choices, and they've lived here all their lives. If you've heard stories of dreamers who've been told that they're going to have to go back to their home country, basically their home country is the United States because they were raised here and it is their country. So DACA is a program that continues to allow people to be here and work. Dreamers is a general term that refers to anyone eligible to apply for the program, meaning any child who is unauthorized but has grown up here. Next. I'm kind of whipping through these really fast. Deportation is basically removal from the United States, and it's done because of a legal violation that denies your authority to be here. It could be that you entered without inspection, which means you entered the United States and did not talk to anyone when you crossed the border. So you're in the United States without having talked to any border agent, and you're living here without any documentation or without them knowing you're here. So they can deport you. If you've been legally admitted to the US, but you remain beyond your authorized period of stay, students, people who come here to work, those are oftentimes the very undocumented people that are here and they were legally admitted, but they overstayed their visas. They can be deported. If you violated the terms of your admission, so maybe you worked without authorization or did something else that you weren't supposed to do, you can be deported. And if you commit certain crimes, which would render you removable, you can be removed from the country. Next. So once you're, if you've been in the United States for 180 days, but not a whole year, and you get deported, you have to remain outside the US for 3 years before you can legally re-enter. If you've been here over a year, you have 10 years before you can legally re-enter the United States. And this is a big deal for many people who've been here and they have families and they've raised families and they have children and they get deported because they're not documented per se. They have to wait 10 years before they can apply to come back to be with their families. Work authorization. If you're an asylum seeker, and you have the documentation that says you have a right to seek asylum, you wait 150 days before you can apply for authorization. I think it's still 150. It became 180, but it might have gone back again. And it usually takes about 30 days to get that authorization, and then you're authorized to work in the United States, and you have to renew that every year. Refugees are automatically authorized to work and they don't have to apply. The citizenship organization will do the application for you and give you your EAD. If you're an asylee, once you're granted asylum, you're authorized to work in the US. And these are the groups that you hear about: ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're the law enforcement agency, and they're the ones that you might see stopping immigrants and sending them back. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services is basically the agency that oversees all immigration to the United States. They're all over the world. And US Customs and Border Protection are the people who are actually on the border. And that can be any border. I think they have 100 miles inland that they patrol, so you'll find border patrol in New Hampshire, as well as on the East Coast and the West Coast, and on the southern border. We usually only see the southern border because that's what's in the news. But I have known people who have been stopped by border patrol on their way down Route 93. So that's that. And if you have questions about those, you can ask at the end. I tried to include ones that I thought were most misinterpreted. And there you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marge. And so now we're going to have a tag team. Susan and Ralph are going to talk about the truth will set us free. So busting myth about immigrants. Susan and Ralph.
Hi, everyone. I'm attorney Susan Simone Kang. I've been an attorney for over 25 years. And in my recent past and today, I practice immigration law. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I'm proud to be the daughter of a naturalized citizen. I'm grateful for birthright citizenship here in the United States and mindful that that opportunity is important and should remain valuable and available to everyone who is born on this soil. And if you'd like to hear more about the reasons why, I can say so in the Q&A. Rolf?
It'll be good if I unmute. I'm Rolf Larson. I'm an immigrant advocate, and I'm involved in various work associated with that sort of activity.
Great, can we go to the next slide? So I'm gonna raise some questions that you may have heard out there in social media or in the community or just chatting with friends and just wondering, what does this actually mean? And is it actually accurate? And I think this is a very timely discussion. So I'm gonna present the question and then Rolf will take the next slide with the actual answer. And I'd like you all to take a beat of a moment to think what you think the answer might be just before we switch over. So these are the immigration facts, true or busted. The first concept is that immigration is a drain on the US economy. Is that true or false? What do you say, Rolf? Next slide.
Well, Susan, that is false. Immigration actually has a positive economic impact. Refugees and other immigrants contribute to the economy by filling essential jobs, starting businesses, and paying taxes. Studies have shown that refugees and other immigrants, both documented and undocumented, contribute more to the economy in taxes than they receive in benefits. Refugees and asylees contributed $123.8 billion over a 15-year period. Earlier research has found that within 20 years of arrival, the average refugee adult contributed approximately $21,000 more in taxes than funds spent on their behalf. And finally, according to the American Immigration Council, immigrants are more likely to be active in the labor force and harness $1.6 trillion of spending power. So false, false, false.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. True or busted? Refugees and other immigrants increase crime rates. True or false, Rolf? Next slide.
This one is interesting to me because it is so misunderstood. It's completely false. This is supported by evidence from Texas, the only state that tracks the immigration and legal status of felony convictions. Studies have shown that areas with higher immigration populations tend to have lower crime rates. Being an undocumented immigrant is not technically a crime, but considered a civil infraction. Some scholars link increased immigration with lower overall crime rates. Many scholars believe that immigration is arguably one of the reasons that crime rates have dropped in the United States over the past decade and a half. And finally, research findings consistently indicate that neighborhoods with large immigrant populations exhibit comparatively lower crime rates. So pretty much the opposite of what we hear in the news every day.
But if you say the word illegal enough times, it might just stick.
There you go.
All right, so immigration fact, true or busted? Refugees and other immigrants are taking jobs away from Americans. True or false? Next slide.
False again, Susan. Refugees and other immigrants often take jobs that Americans are unwilling to do, especially in industries like agriculture, construction, and hospitality. The American Immigration Council reports that immigrants make up a significant portion of the workforce in industries such as agriculture, 26%, construction, 15%, and hospitality, 17%. Immigrants contribute to economic growth by filling labor shortages, which can create more jobs for everyone. And a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that immigration has a small but positive effect on the wages of native-born workers overall.
So we lift one and we lift us all. Okay, next immigration fact, true or busted? Undocumented immigrants skew election results. This one really makes my skin crawl as an attorney. True or false, Rolf?
This is getting boring. False. A report by the Brennan Center determined that nationwide studies have uncovered only a handful of incidents of non-citizens voting, with non-citizen votes accounting for, read, almost 0% of all votes cast in the 2016 election. Under federal law, no individual who is not a U.S. citizen, whether they be undocumented, have a temporary visa, or have a green card, may participate in federal elections under the stipulations of the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. That act categorically prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections, including the House, Senate, and the presidency. And non-citizens can be severely penalized, including fines, imprisonment, and even deportation, which is part of the reason why they aren't willing to do this.
So immigration fact, truth or busted? Seeking asylum at the border is illegal. True or false?
And Marge already touched on this, but we can sort of dive into it a little bit more. It's absolutely false, Susan. Seeking asylum is a long-standing legal right protected by both domestic and international law. The U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act grants the right to all individuals to seek asylum regardless of how they enter a country, including crossing between points of entry. Long-standing U.S. law says that any person must have the opportunity to seek asylum who is physically present in the United States or who arrives at the border.
And there you have it. Thank you both so much. And then please know that we're also going to be sending some resources, and they will include the terms that Marge went through, and then also we will send the myth and that Susan and Rolf just went over as well. So now we are inviting Lauren Adams to talk about the immigrants in our midst, and so the English language learner at Natick High School, and for all of us to hear their stories. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you very much. Loved hearing those myths busted, Susan and Ralph. So thank you very much. We are taking notes here. So I want to share a little bit about some of our students and families who come to us as English learners at Natick, in the Natick schools, throughout the Natick schools. The EL population has been growing pretty significantly over the last few years. So you can see a few numbers just from 3 years ago that we've about quadrupled our numbers. Actually, I can't do math. Yeah, at least multiplied by 4. And just at the high school, when I started in 2012, I had 7 English learners. And we now have 50 active English learners plus another 35, I believe, former English learners. So it's been quite a change in the last few years. You can go to the next slide. There's the arrow. It's going up. There we go. So who are our English learners? I think lots of folks are familiar with many of the immigrants coming to us from South and Central America, but we are actually a lot more culturally and linguistically diverse than folks tend to realize. So we have at least 50 languages in the district right now. And at the high school, there's some, here's some that are just at the high school. So among the 50 I mentioned, our students are speaking Arabic, Armenian, Bengali, Gujarati, Hebrew, Hindi, Mandarin. I do not speak those languages, which is a question I often get. We are an English immersion program, not a bilingual program. But we are, you know, the kids are coming to us from all over the world. And then in addition to the students who are identified as English learners, many other families in the district just speak another language at home. So there's lots more folks with these diverse backgrounds. We are working really hard right now within the schools to improve our communication with better translation. It's something that's been frustrating to a number of us. Information goes out and is not readily accessible to folks who speak another language. So we are working hard to improve that. And you can go to the next slide again. Why do EL families come here? Mainly for the same reasons that lots of families move all over the world. People travel for better opportunities. Some of our parents have jobs in higher ed or tech in the area, so they may be coming because they already have a great position. So that dispels some other myths about, you know, why everyone comes. Again, like everyone, they're coming for economic opportunity, they're coming for a good education. But we also have a number of families who are coming for push factors, because they really need to leave where they are. As you know, there's war in many places in the world right now, other kinds of conflict going on, various dangers. You know, we've had families threatened with gang violence and needing to get themselves and their kids out just to keep them safe. So lots of reasons why folks come here, and we don't care if a student is in our school. They are our student, and we are going to give them the best education that we can. You could jump to the next slide. So a little more about who are these kids really? So they come to us with a real wide range of English proficiency, from newcomer, which are students with little to zero English whatsoever. You can imagine how challenging that is for someone arriving in high school in particular. I mean, for students of any age, but coming to high school and you are needing to learn not only English, but chemistry and history and calculus and everything else in English, and pass those MCAS tests. Something to think about when the election comes on Tuesday, whether we want to keep those MCAS tests. So really they're coming with a wide range. Some of them have studied English already, and so they have a little bit more information under their belts. They also come from very diverse academic backgrounds. Schooling is not the same all over the world. So they might have a different kind of system from the US. They may have very different cultural traditions in terms of how students are expected to do school, how they interact with teachers. So lots of teachers will think, you know, our kids just refuse to talk and are very shy, and we'll find out that they really weren't expected to speak up to their teachers and ask questions and interrupt the way most of our kids are used to doing throughout their educational careers. They bring lots of strengths to our community. So obviously they are coming with lots of varied cultural experiences. They have different perspectives. We have some absolutely fascinating conversations when we're talking about different issues, when kids will share, oh, this is how we do it in our country. Things are very different. And, you know, the kids are learning from one another as well. And of course, they're just, you know, kids age 4 in preschool to 18 or so graduating from high school, like any other kids who, you know, want to learn, who want to be here, who want to make friends and have a good life. Do I have one more student? No, can we just back up to that one for a minute? I was just going to share a little bit more. So just a little more on the more personal side of our students. So most of them are super eager to learn. They want to be successful. They know they need English in order to be successful. In my experience at the high school, they're also teenagers. So like all teens, we'll see typical teen distractions and interests and romance and friendships and all that good stuff. And as I mentioned before about some of the conflict and dangers, recently we have had an increasing number of students who are experiencing a lot of trauma. As you probably won't be surprised, we have a greater number of students coming from Ukraine and also from Russia, with things that are going on there. Some of them are leaving family members behind who are not able to leave. We have students whose fathers are in the military in Ukraine, because the men are not permitted to leave right now. So that's obviously something they're carrying with them. That's really, really tough. The EL classroom tends to be one of the more safe and comfortable spaces for these students. They're with, kids like themselves. They're not as nervous about speaking in front of American peers. So we as ELL teachers have the privilege of getting to know them really well. This population is so near and dear to my heart, and that really is the same for other English language teachers. I have a brand new EL teacher this year. She has been in education for many years. She's taught history. She's taught Spanish. This is the first year she's taken on an ELL class, and she has just fallen in love and says it is the most rewarding teaching she's ever done. We just get so much back from these kids. So generally, we do learn a lot more about what's going on in their lives and families than typical teachers might. But even so, there can be lots going on that we don't know about. So one example was a student who came to us. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do we need to move on?
Yeah, a couple more minutes and then we need to, sorry.
Okay, I was just gonna give a quick summary story of a student who came to us in sophomore year. She had very little English. She was a super beginner. And, we got to know her. Her English was really improving. We didn't find out until the middle of her senior year that she had actually walked from Guatemala to the US alone with her sister, taking buses and walking and trying to get help crossing the border. She had been through a tremendous experience, but by the time she reached her senior year, she was flourishing. She was on the track team. She was doing well in school, and she actually gave a Natick TEDx talk at the last time that Natick did that, speaking to everyone. So the great thing is getting to see so much growth from these kids.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Those are the stories of the immigrants that are in our midst. And so the next person that is going to do a presentation for us is Andrea Rivas Precomber, and she's has been a member also of the Natick Immigration Policy Coalition. And I am going to take this down so that we can actually give her the space for her to be able to speak to us. And I am also going to put her in speaker mode. So thank you so much, Andrea, for being willing to share your story.
Sure. Thank you so much, Miriam. Can I start now? Can you please just let me know when my time is almost up so I can wrap up?
Okay.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for everyone who is joining here today and for being interested in this topic and willing to talk about it and hear people talking about their stories. And I'm very proud to be here to represent a community, but in no way I represent that community. I'm just one voice of several voices that are out there. And I just want to talk a little bit about myself and my story and the stories of people I heard doing the work that I do. That I'm an immigration attorney, so I've been dealing with immigration law since 2014 when I moved to the US. So I'm gonna get there, but first I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about who is Andrea, because I'm also not only an immigrant, I'm also a full person, and that doesn't define my identity, right? So just so you know a little bit about how I ended up in the United States. I was born and raised in Roraima, that is in the border with Venezuela, and inside the Amazon. And my mom and my dad were both attorneys back home, and they work with the indigenous people over there in human rights for a long, long time. So I always felt that they were the reason why I want to be a lawyer and I want to follow this path. I end up being raised by my mom after a few years, just my mom and my brother and sister, and we end up moving down southern Brazil so my sister could go to med school. So we have a doctor, an attorney, and an engineer in the family. And in no way we were, I like to say that when I was in Brazil, I was in the privileged side. I was a privileged kid. I was in the best schools, in the best college, and I had the opportunity to study in private schools. I was from middle class, and it was never my dream to come to the United States. I didn't have any interest at all. I was like, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to try to be a judge or a prosecutor and all that. But then life happens, and I met my husband at the time. And then he said, you need to go to the United States, be a lawyer there. They love smart people. And then I was like, okay. So he tries to convince me, and I say, no, you should stay here. And he said, I really have a bad Portuguese. Your English is so much better. And then I said, okay, but I'm going to study law because that's what I love. So I start researching, and I end up going to law school in Chicago, where my husband was living at the time. So that's when I started working with immigration law. I was a tax lawyer before. And thinking about my roots, I was like, I don't want to work with companies anymore. I just want to work with people. And I started volunteering in a shelter for immigrant kids. And that's when I saw that something was wrong. Something was really wrong. That it wasn't fair, these kids going through all this trauma to get here and then staying in a shelter without their parents and be not able to go outside when they want to. And by being with those kids every weekend, every Saturday for 2 years, that's when I was like, I say it's like a passion I have is just advocate for these children. But most importantly, I feel rewarded that they trust me with their story, because that's really hard. And so after that, I went to law school, came to Massachusetts because of the big Brazilian population, opened my firm here in 2020, and here in Natick Center, and been dealing with cases of mostly violence against women, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and abuse against children. So that's my focus. That's what I work with. And during all these years working with immigration law, working in the immigrant community, the thing I want people to understand is that nobody leaves their home, their family, their culture, the things they know best, to come to a whole different place and have to learn everything again. If they're coming, there is a reason. And I think it's worth to say that even if it's an economical reason, you can imagine how bad things are back home. And I think the most important thing I took from my story and from the story the people I work with is that the first thing we need to, when we talk about immigrant community and being an ally or anything like that, let's make people know how it works, how immigrants are here, that they are part of the community. I think it's really important for us to not forget that even us trying to do something good for them, we need to make sure their voices are being heard. And the only way to make their voices heard are by acknowledging their existence and that they are part of our community. So that's the importance of this work that these people here doing today, that they are doing in the committee, and that Miriam does. And I think this is like, if I could say something, is keep that in mind, like acknowledging that the community exists, that they have needs, and that they need to be heard, and that this is bringing safety to them, the capacity of being heard and talk and speak up by themselves. So
Thank you so much, Andrea. Really appreciate you telling your story and the way that you are contributing to the life of other immigrants that are coming here to Natick and the Metro West area.
thank you.
So now we are going to continue our presentation, and we are going to have Cody talk a little bit about the policy that we have been working on. So give me just a second here. There you are, Cody, if you're all set.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks to all the wonderful previous speakers who did such a great job. So proud of you guys. I want to talk to you a little bit about something more that's a little bit more nuts and boltsy about this. It's the idea of having a welcoming immigration policy in Natick. And that is kind of where we get our name of the Welcoming Immigration Policy Coalition, because our goal is to create such a policy for Natick to make it it's something we can do locally to make Natick a more welcoming community for people, for everyone. So just a little background first about who we are. You can go to the next slide. Or the previous one, there we go. Good. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so who we are. So we're a group of, you see some of us here. We're a group of Natick residents from many different backgrounds. And our goal is to make Natick a more welcoming place for everyone, but especially people who are non-citizens, who are immigrants. And appreciating that Natick obviously has a commitment as a community to equity and inclusion. In general, we've focused on becoming a more welcoming community for people of all immigration statuses. And in doing so, we did notice a gap between Natick and other communities in Massachusetts, which is that we do not have a formal policy codifying our commitment to being a welcoming immigration community as some other municipalities in Massachusetts do. So over the last 3 years, and actually it's been a little more than 3 years at this point, it's been a long process. We've carefully researched the issue and engaged with various stakeholders in town, both in the public and in town government, such as the police, the select board, and of course the Natick public schools. And that process is ongoing. It continues with public events like this and things like that to try to get more buy-in from people. But what am I talking about when I say an immigration policy? So an immigration policy, a welcoming immigration policy, is a policy that ensures that everyone is treated equally by Natick's government, regardless of immigration status. It's not something that inhibits law enforcement in any way. It would not prevent anyone from being arrested, charged, or convicted of a crime, regardless of their immigration status. It simply says that everyone should be treated the same, with immigration status not playing a role in it. And I'll get in a couple more slides, I'll get into a little more specifics about what that would entail. But first, I just wanted to note, a little bit about terminology here, because you sometimes hear policies like this referred to as a sanctuary policy, but we call this a welcoming policy. And I wanted to explain a little bit about why. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's consistent with the language used in these other policies in Massachusetts. As I mentioned, this has become kind of a movement within the state, and we want to, keep Natick within that movement, which is referred to them as welcoming policies. Another reason is sort of a concern about the term sanctuary being a little bit misleading, just because the way that this policy would work is it's not providing affirmative benefits or anything like that to anyone. It's only ensuring that people are treated equally. So it's kind of being welcoming, but it's not necessarily providing anything, kind of beyond that. And maybe we should and things like that, but it's just in the interest of clarity to be clear about what the policy would do. So in thinking about why we need a policy like this, it's important to understand the immigration policy landscape in Massachusetts. So here, if you can go to the next slide. There we go. So Massachusetts law already does some things that protect non-citizens. So one thing it does is it prohibits police from detaining suspects in jail at the behest of ICE who are otherwise scheduled to be released. This process sometimes called an ICE detainer, basically where ICE knows that a person was arrested for something. They're about to be released, and they call up the police and they say, "Hey, can you hold this person in jail until we can get there and arrest them?" In Massachusetts, the police have to say no. They cannot do that because Massachusetts law prohibits that. However, Massachusetts law does not address whether police are allowed to ask people about their immigration status or share information with ICE about people in police custody, or assist ICE with immigration raids, and things like that. So there's definitely a gap where local action can come in to help provide greater protection to non-citizens than what Massachusetts already does. And to that end, many cities and towns have already done this. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see a list of some example communities that have welcoming immigration policies in Massachusetts. And I would note this is definitely not an exhaustive list. There's others as well. But these are a few examples, and some of these are very, very near to us, like Newton, or obviously Boston. And you might be surprised to see that it's not just kind of the usual suspects of like your Cambridges and things like that, but there's also smaller towns like Acton on this list. So I think it's something that really can happen anywhere, and is a movement throughout the state to kind of get local government out of the business of enforcing federal immigration law. So to that end, here are some of the key features of what an immigration policy could look like in Natick. So one is that it would prohibit any town employee from asking for immigration status, from asking for information about a person's status. So this would include police, but it would also include social services, things like that. They would never ask about immigration status. It also prohibits town employees from participating in enforcing federal immigration law, except, of course, where required by state or federal law, and prohibits the use of town resources to enforce federal immigration law. And finally, it would prohibit town employees from sharing information with ICE, except where they are required to by, again, you see the theme here, right? Except where they're required to by a higher source of law, by state or federal law. And so these are kind of the key features of it. Now, you might say, well, why do we need this? We have a great police department. We have a great town government that isn't regularly asking people about their immigration status. And I would say that you're right about that we do have a great town government and a great police department that's been a leader in non-bias training and all those great things. But it's still very important to formally codify a policy here. For one thing, it sends a message to undocumented community members, or even as we heard earlier, people who are in more of a gray area with documentation, that this is a safe place, that we stand with them. And it encourages people who are undocumented or have other statuses to report crimes to police and to utilize town services without fear. And it ensures that these practices continue into the future, regardless of if the leadership of the police changes or political leadership changes, that we have this policy that codifies what our values are and the fact that we're not going to engage in this. So one question that we get a lot when when we bring this issue up is, well, why are you talking about this as something that we need to do in Natick? Like, it seems like this is a national issue. We need, national immigration reform and things like that. And this doesn't have to do with Natick. Why is this a Natick issue? But I would say it is a Natick issue. I mean, as we've heard tonight, immigrants are our community, are people who live here and are part of the fabric of our town. And so I think it's very much a local issue. And our town government certainly isn't the forum for debating federal immigration policy or policy at the border or anything like that, but we can't ignore the consequences of those policies for our residents. And so again, it's one small piece of the puzzle. This policy on its own is not enough to make Natick a welcoming community overall, but it's an important piece of that puzzle. It's a good start. And so that's why we've decided to start here. What form would this take in Natick? So different towns have approached this in different ways. You saw that list a little bit back, and obviously it's, the complexities of different forms of government in Massachusetts, but some have passed bylaws through their town meeting. Others have passed policies through their select board. Right now, we're currently pursuing the path of working with the select board to try to get a policy in place through that avenue for a number of reasons. It kind of comports with the select board's focus on equity. It also, does concern town employees, which is within the select board's purview. And again, it is a little bit more easily modified than a bylaw, so that's another reason to do it. Now, that said, a bylaw could still be a path forward in the future, depending on what action the select board takes. But right now, we've been in, kind of productive conversations with them, and there's interest on the board in trying to get this done at that level. So that's kind of where we think that's the best place to go for it. And just as a plug for that, if you know members of the select board, if you run into them, if you want to write to them, tell them that this is important to you so they hear from the public, because it's good for them to hear from people who are members of the community about why this is important to them and something that is worth their time to take up and do. As I said, they've been very cooperative and receptive in the meetings that we've had with them, but it cannot hurt at all to hear from folks who support this idea because, unfortunately, there is some opposition to it as well in our community. So that's all I have. I'll turn it back to Miriam to keep us going. But I just want to thank. I'm so excited to see so many people here. Some I know, some I don't. So it's great. So thank you guys for coming, and thanks again to the other speakers as well.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you so much. And so then our last speaker for the night is Jennifer Gentile, and she's part of the group of people of our town that have been welcoming immigrants in their homes. And so she's going to tell us about her story and what that has been like. Jennifer?
Wonderful. If we could go to the first slide, or the next slide, I should say. Thank you. And I should say I outsourced a little bit. My 14-year-old wrote this presentation because in part I didn't have time, but also in part that this is a group effort in our family and in our community. So some call it outsourcing, I call it collaborative work. And so our family motto is do small things with great love. Mother Teresa used to say that. And quite small. There's a variety of things that we have done, kind of more and less time intensive. To say a little bit about our family, we have 4 kids, ages 8 to 14, and my husband's out of town, coincidentally, tonight. So this is my youngest to our 8-year-old. I know, right? Oftentimes we've done this talks before, and my 11-year-old comes with me. This guy who's pictured in the picture. And so the past couple of years after our youngest 2 are adopted, and so our family kind of grew pretty quickly. So it took a little bit of settling down, trying to figure out how to manage 4 kids with all similar ages. But after we settled down, we tried to figure out how can we contribute to the community while also taking care of our kind of own immediate family as well. So we went, I think when the Ukraine war started, we put our name on a bunch of lists. Apparently nobody was interested in staying in our house or needed a home for folks coming over from Ukraine. So we kind of waited in that respect. And then And then Charlie, you can come down if you want. This is the same talk we've done before. And then we've also and then put our name on some lists and thinking we have a little bit of extra space. You can come sit in our house to, do you want to get in the picture? I just not your body. And so we hosted a family and it was really neat. We're not a super religious family, but I think it was on Good Friday that we started hosting them. And my 14-year-old actually said, this is the most beautiful thing on Good Friday to do this. This is exactly what you're supposed to do on Good Friday. I thought, wow, those CCD classes really did ring true. And so it was a mother and 2 kiddos, and they were somewhat similar ages to our kiddos. And they stayed with us for a few months. It was a really neat experience, kind of a wonderful cultural experience. My son is much better on my right here, is a much better cook than I. And Manitha, the mom who stayed with us, she taught him how to cook really good rice and chicken. And the kids I have a couple other pictures along the slides, but they just kind of, we integrated into each other's lives. I should say that I still went to work every day. My husband went to work. We both work full time. And the kids go to school, and the mom and the kiddo stayed, and then eventually the eldest of the kids went to school here in Lilja, which was great. It was such a good lesson for my kids to hear a 7-year-old like literally crying out every time when the kids would come home from school. Why can't I go to school? It's my dream to go to school in America. And I mean, talk about impactful for the kids to see that and to see how grateful she was when she started school at Lilja. We've also had the opportunity to host other families short term, and then also been the beneficiary of great work. And not only us, but many neighbors in our area. We live in the High Street, Johnson School area. And a number of families have worked with a handful of the families from Haiti. And they've done tremendous work. And I was just lamenting before this call that they've just become somewhat part of our family in a very beautiful way. Of Albert and Gerard, of they were painting in our house, and the kids were playing, and I was working on my computer with work, and it's just been such a lovely experience, and for all of us a lovely experience. We have learned so much, and this gentleman Albert, he's taught me about faith. Like I said, I'm not a very religious person, but I was talking to him the other day, and I was saying, you really taught me, because until he got his housing, he kept telling me God will provide, and he's amazing. He ended up getting housing, which is phenomenal, in Chelsea. And so yes, lots of neat opportunities. And if we go to the next, and this is Asher, the 4-year-old, and Charlie on the first day. And this is just an example of like, they lived with us and they just integrated in our lives. And, so it was, like I said, a lovely experience in that way. We definitely became very close to them. The housing they got, the landlord was my father's, went to high school with the landlord in Worcester randomly. So these are just the kids watching TV on a Friday night. It was a good amount of activity, so you can see the gymnastics bar in our living room, which helped reduce the activity. And we can go to the next slide. And just pictures of us together. Again, this is kind of the original family that we hosted from, I think, March until the end of the school year. Next slide. And this was the first day when I should say that, actually, if you could just quickly go back to that slide. On the far right was the first day that they came, and we'd never hosted. We didn't know what this was all about. And it was so interesting. The mom came, and I gave her a big hug, and she spoke like a little bit of English, a little bit of Spanish, mostly Haitian Creole, and and Spanish, I should say. And she came in our house, and she immediately went and she slept for 4 hours. And we had these kids who we just met in our house. And when she came up, and so that's where my daughter, they're both similar ages, they were playing together. And she came up and she said, I've been in the airport for 4 days. And then before that, I was on a bus for 20 days. And I said, 23 days. And she said, and I never knew if my kids were safe, and I couldn't sleep. So it was like, so it's, powerful beyond powerful in that respect. And just to say, as parents, like, what were we doing? We were just hanging out with the kids. We're hanging out with our own kids and their kids. And And then let's go to the next slide, please. And this is Asher, who's just the cutest 4-year-old. And he was 4. Yep. So everything that comes with being a 4-year-old.
He's 5 now.
He's 5 now.
His
Yep.
birthday was July 23rd.
Yeah, we got to celebrate his birthday with him. They stayed at the Presbyterian, Hartford Street Presbyterian Church. It's the first church in Natick, first church in Massachusetts to host immigrants coming across the border. And they lived there from, I think, June until this past weekend when they moved into their own house in Worcester. And then, and of course, you know, he was 4, so he learned English so quickly, these little sponge brains. And then next slide. And this is the Francois family. Sorry, Albert's family. So let's see, these are teenage boys on either side, and then 11-year-olds. And then this is the Albert, the dad. He speaks French, Creole, English, Spanish, Portuguese, and he's teaching Charlie different languages. And I was actually out of the home yesterday afternoon when they were painting. And then I ended up driving Albert back to the train station. He said, you know, your son, he taught me a blessing yesterday. And it was just so powerful and so interesting how each person's interacting. And you know, they were here over the weekend. I forgot why they were, but they were here over the weekend, and I could hear my 8-year-old interacting with like 2 adults, you know what I mean? Which was so nice because he's a guy, he's got a lot of energy and lots of support at school. So it was amazing to see him kind of holding his own with, you know, with 2 people, and now he knows them as family, which is really neat. And like I said, they've done work. They're available for work. If anybody needs any yard work, landscaping, painting, etc., feel free to reach out to me or Brian at the Hartford Street Presbyterian Church. And then finally, just more pictures. And this is a Gerard's family. They have 4 lovely girls.
Lecca, Jennifer, I think Jennifer, Gerard, I forget the mother's name.
Winderly.
Winderly, and then I know the other 2 ones.
You did well. And so so this family, I should say, and Albert's family, they have stayed at our house when we've not been there. And this is through the Hartford Street Presbyterian Church. And what we did was we just asked one of the church elders, we asked if they could have somebody there at all times just to help to host the oven and the washer and dryer and things like that. So when we've gone away, they've stayed at our house. Why not have them stay at our house, you know, when it's empty? And I don't think these videos work anymore, but I hope I can get across, you know, I know the other talks, I learned so much, but mine is not a data informed talk. Mine is a regular person. My husband and I work full time, you know, just trying to do what we can do within the context of our lives. You know, we don't have the ability to give money, you know, we can give some time, but not a lot of time, but we can give space and we can share, right? Those are kind of our 2 ways in which we can contribute in our lives. And thinking about, you know, how do you give so it's not super burdensome on your life? So examples of, you know, I picked kids up to go to the playground, or go take people to the grocery store, things along that line to think about how, you know, if you can contribute. But there's a whole big list, I know now, that a variety of things, like one great need I'd love to have fulfilled is just to in reality kind of set out a budget. What do you need to live in this area or in Massachusetts? Because I think there's a lot of fantasies about, you know, US being the land of milk and honey, and you get here and you make all this money per hour, but it goes away so quickly. But thank you all, and thank you for spending your Wednesday night here. And I honestly can say that we've received as much as we have given as far as our experiences in welcoming new folks to this country.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and family, for your testimony of being a welcoming family. And that is what Cody was talking about in terms of that we go from policy to actually the reality of what it could happen and the transformation that happens when you really welcome immigrants to your home. So we were a little bit on a journey. We started with high level with terms and the myth And then we were able to talk a little bit about or hear from Andrea and then from Cody about the policy that we're working here in town. And then we also heard from Lauren and what is happening in our schools. So immigrants are here to stay. They are part of our fabric at this point. And so how do we become then this welcoming community? And then we heard from Jennifer and her family how you actually do it. And that is actually possible. And that it really benefits both, right? The immigrants that come here and the families learn from them. So now we're going to spend a little bit of time with questions. So just raise your hand or put it in the chat. We have a few minutes, and then you can direct your question to one of the speakers or in general. And yeah, let's make this a very friendly space where we can learn from one another in this question and answer space.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Just to point out, so Lauren mentioned the lovely young lady who quite literally walked across the border from Guatemala. She was an intern at my startup and is, absolutely phenomenal, has graduated from college, and what a success story in Natick. And she was well supported throughout high school and her college experience. So it's a great example of success that can happen here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Questions that you may have? I think that there's a question in the chat. Does TPS count as documentation?
Yes, it does. So there are 16 countries currently designated with TPS status. It is an executive branch decision. It's made by the Secretary of Homeland Security. It's different from humanitarian assistance, in which the President of the United States can make a proclamation to directly grant humanitarian aid to anyone that he designates from a particular country. But there are currently 16. Temporary protected status does not lead to permanent status. It is a renewable status that you have to continue to connect and stay constantly in contact with your attorney. There are dates. They're very, very tricky to follow, to keep track of making sure you file at the right time and don't miss any deadlines. Imagine you're constantly in contact with your attorney to know that you're okay and that you're safe and covered. So temporary protected status is in fact documentation. And
Thank
I
you,
would just
Susan.
yes.
So other questions that we may have? Comments? Okay, from Cindy. Cody mentioned there is some opposition to the immigrant welcoming policy. Do we know the nature of that opposition? What concerns folks are raising? Yeah, sorry, couldn't find the raise hand. That you can also come unmute. So, Cody?
Yeah, so as far as the nature of the opposition, I mean, I don't think there's like organized opposition to it, but there are definitely people who have expressed some concerns. And we've actually met with people who have been, kind of in opposition to it, or who have had concerns about it. And I'd say the most common thing is a concern about, kind of, I think it actually kind of gets into some of the presentation that Susan and Ralph did, like about some of these myths, right? So there's people who think that, well, if we have this policy, there's going to be crime and the police won't be able to do anything because people are protected by the immigration policy. And so I think that, there's some people are misinformed both about the statistics and the realities regarding crime and immigration, and also about what this policy does, because, as I mentioned, it doesn't inhibit the normal operation. I think there's probably also like a little bit of institutional resistance in terms of like, wanting to go out on a limb and do something new, that we haven't done before, and adopting a policy like this. Within the police department, probably concerns about you know, being able to cooperate with ICE on, you know, criminal investigations and things like that, where they think that, you know, they've done that in the past or something like that, where it's, you know, concerning very serious crimes and things like that. So that's some of the nature of it. I mean, I don't want to speak obviously for other people who oppose it, but I think that's some of the themes of the things that we've heard from people. And I mean, that's, you know, that's sort of what some of these events are for, is trying to like dispel some of the myths and things like that.
That makes sense. You had a lot of info on the slides, and I look forward to looking at them more closely. Was part of the info on there an actual draft of a policy, or no?
So no, there's no draft. There is no draft policy on the slides. The slides do have one that says, like, you know, key features of a policy, that says like what it would include. As far as the drafts go, you know, we did have a draft that we've come up with, that, you know, we've shared before, and we can share it with you. It's not a secret draft or anything like that. But you know, we've kind of been in kind of ongoing talks with the select board, the police department, as far as trying to reach something that we're all comfortable with. And so it's not, you know, the reason like we don't put that out in like a presentation like this, we don't give the wrong idea that like this is some kind of town approved anything, because it's just what we had sort of come up with as things we wanted, kind of taking into account some of the concerns we had heard from the town. But we're happy to share it with you. But that's sort of where it is as far as the draft goes, because ultimately at the end of the day, like, we don't control the draft. Like, it's up to the select board what they draft and vote.
I think personally, I heard the invitation to reach out to the select board, and I think for me, it would be helpful to have the draft in order to do that, you know, to be able to speak to some of the points. So yeah, I'd love to know, again, draft is the key word, or proposal or whatever, but that would be super helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cody and Cindy. And so continuing with the questions on TPS, so once they have TPS, should they then apply for asylum to have longer term protection? Susan, what do you say?
Right. So I see Andrea getting off. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Sorry, Andrea had to leave a little bit earlier. Yeah,
right. Otherwise I would have handed that to her too. But when we do an intake for a client, we ask a lot of questions, and we probably ask them the set of questions more than once to better understand exactly the situation that they're in, including the date that they first arrived here to the United States. Because as it was mentioned earlier in the slides, you apply for asylum within 1 year of your arrival, and you must have a fear of past persecution and a credible fear of future persecution. And there are a set of criteria based on 5 protected social groups and political opinion that would qualify you for that. So lawyers have to think very thoughtfully and in a larger context of what are the possible available avenues. And TPS would be an avenue that you would choose more likely if you didn't have other opportunities. I'll give you a quick example. I represented a young girl who at the age of 10 left her country of Haiti, went through the Dominican Republic with her mom and lived in Brazil for several months, traveled through South America with her mom on foot with a group of people, and mom passed away somewhere between Panama and the Texas border in a river. Dad had already passed away. So I did not have documentation to show that parents are deceased, and therefore I could not get special immigrant juvenile status, which is what you would get when a child arrives unaccompanied at the border on the basis of abuse, abandonment, and neglect under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is where she came, eventually went. And so without any other options available to me, we applied for TPS as soon as it was possible, because this is what could be done at the time. And that could change anytime up until age 21 for somebody with special immigrant juvenile status. If that doesn't happen, a person can adjust their status through marriage potentially in the United States. But those are to give you an idea of like all the different things that you have to think about when you speak to somebody who has arrived.
Thank you, Susan. Other questions? Yeah, Kristen, yes?
So I'm working with some families from the Hartford Street Presbyterian Church, and one of the roles I've taken on is helping them get temporary protected status. But now that we've done that, it seems like we should have just applied for asylum. So where can I go who's the we that will ask the questions to find out what the right forms are to get completed?
Right. So I would just recommend to speak with an immigration attorney to fully understand the full background. Andrea is currently actively practicing. I support her from time to time. So you might want to reach out to her to discuss that situation. Otherwise, yeah, we're not able to give able to give any kind of meaningful legal advice without knowing the facts. Yeah.
Okay, so Andrea is one way that I can find a legal immigration attorney.
She and I are both immigration attorneys, right?
Okay, so I should go to you and or her?
Her
and
primarily, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, Kristen, I will give you her contact information.
Okay, cool, thank you.
All right. Other questions that we may have? Are you curious about some of the experiences with Jennifer and her family? Any more questions about the schools and what are other kinds of supports that are being given to families there?
Could I also add, sorry, Cody?
No, you go ahead.
I was going to add that when families come here, and Ralph, you know a little more about this than I do, but they have money for food, money for clothing, there's not a lot of financial support that they need. If it helps to know if folks are interested in hosting through the programs. There's also a really neat program through the government called Home Base, where they receive up to $30K for 2 years of rent assistance and support with furniture and first last rent and things along that line. So helping doesn't necessarily require a financial commitment.
Thank you, Jennifer. That is important for people to know.
I was just going to say
Cody?
something logistical. I was just going to bring up a logistical thing, which is just I know this is being recorded, and to the question earlier, if with the recording, if the slideshow is also going to be posted in the same place, or could be.
Yes.
Sure.
I thought I might just mention something that I alluded to earlier in the conversation, which is this concept of birthright citizenship. This is another sort of myth to be busted, and it requires sort of a knowledge of history. But our Supreme Court in 1898 determined in a case that was incredibly significant. It's US v. Wong Kim Ark. And it was decided in 1898, and it was based on an American of Chinese descent who was born in the United States, who just traveled to China and then was not permitted to re-enter the United States, raising the issue of, is a person born in the United States of immigrant parents a US citizen? And the basis of that ruling is our 14th Amendment of the United States, our citizenship clause, which was a hard-fought clause after the Civil War, was placed there to close the chapter of a brutal civil war in our country's history, in which we enslaved Africans and of course, as we know in our history, also created the forced displacement of indigenous peoples in this country. But I just want to point out that these are hard fought ideals, and they are in a historical context. So when you hear this idea of eliminating birthright citizenship, it is grounded in an appreciation of diversity and inclusion, and the fact that no one should be a second-class citizen in the United States, certainly not on the basis of race, nationality, or ethnic origin. So I just wanted to point that out, because that's not in our myth slides, but it's certainly been circulating around. It was proposed nationally as to actually eliminate that right. So just want to point out its significance.
Thank you, Susan. That was important information. So we at a time, we will be sending resources, and then also we'll follow up with a quick survey. Please provide your feedback. That is help us to not only improve the issues that we just were presenting today, but then future programs for Natick is United. We appreciate that you were willing to spend this evening with us. As they say in the airlines, right? You have a choice of choosing whichever trip you want to take. We are so happy that you decided to spend this time with us. Really, really appreciate it. There is a book that I put in the chat, and then we will also put that title in the resources. Everyone who is gone is here. The United States, Central American, and the Making of a Crisis by a well-known journalist, Jonathan Blitzer. A really awesome book to read, why people are coming here from Central America. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for preparing your content. And then if the coalition members can stay for a little bit, then everyone is free to move about the country or Natick or the world, whatever you need to be doing. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.